And honestly, things don't have to be perfect. This university study, we take a bow out of tune, a little out of tune, and then like way out of tune. And we test, broadheads with different vane designs. And it's amazing to me how much be off on things and still get really good flight at long range with fixed blade broadheads, with the right vane design.
I was like, well, if I throw a mic on, then I can help others the way that these people have all helped me.
Born in the heart of the Pennsylvania deer camp. With the help of experts, friends, and local legends, we bring you valuable knowledge and powerful stories for your hunting adventures. Welcome to the East Meets West Hunt Podcast with your host, Beau Martonik.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt Podcast. And today I have on Bill Vanderheyden from Iron Will, and Bill's been on the podcast plenty of times in the past, but it's been, I think I looked at it, and it's probably been about 20 months since the last time that you've been on, almost 2 years. So it's been a little while.
Hey, Beau. Yeah, glad to be on. Thanks for having me on again. I was trying to figure that out. So I was thinking it'd been a couple of years, but yeah, it's good to get back on and catch up with you.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to get to talk to you again, which is, it's funny because anytime I do this with guests that I've had on the past, I'm always kind of blown away at how long it'd been since the last time, because you and I have talked and, saw you at shows and everything in between. But as far as being on the podcast, it's been a little while. But
lots happened since then, probably.
Yeah, no, definitely lots happened, and especially within Iron Will and everything that's going on there, and we'll get into it here in a little bit. But I really want to dive into a lot today with arrow setups, vane configurations, all that stuff that you love diving into, and everybody that really is into archery seems to geek out on. And I feel like arrows, broadheads, components, all that stuff is something that has changed more than just about anything when it comes to, a bow or archery equipment and thought processes and the way people look at it. I mean, I think that seems to be changing trends and things just about every year. So it'll be an interesting conversation. But before we do that, I wanted to ask you to see how your season went last year, and if you got to, get away from work a little bit and do some hunting.
Yeah, I definitely got in quite a lot of hunting. It's I love to hunt, so I just try to bow hunt as much as I can and get to test products doing it and see how they perform. But really, that's why focused on this business, is because I love bow hunting. So it was a good year. I got a really big bear in last May in Saskatchewan, like 473 pounder in the spring, just a tank of a black bear. And then I went back to Alaska, up to the Brooks Range, like you had done before. I think the first year I did it, we were both going up that year, I believe, or maybe you did it a year before me. But
no, you actually went up. What time of year did you hunt the first time you were up there? Was it?
I think it was like August 13th or something. It was early.
Yeah, you were there like about a week before I got up there. I got there like the 20th or so. But yeah, we went the same year.
Okay. So I've done this trip 3 times now. I mean, I just love it up there in the Brooks Range. It's just so far, so remote. You just really feel like you're back in the wilderness there for sure. And chasing caribou alongside wolves and bears. I just love it. But I got a really big caribou this year, big bull with, big C-shape, sweeping antlers. So that was definitely a highlight. I just love that hunt up there. I got an elk in Colorado, a 6-point bull in Colorado, wilderness area. And I got a few whitetails. So it was a good year. I can't complain.
Yeah. No, I'd say it's a great year. But with it's so funny when you're talking about caribou and the big sweeping, antlers. All caribou looks so different. That's what's really cool about them. Like, you'll find one. So the one I had shot in 2020 had big double shovel fronts and everything on them, but the top was nothing impressive. But it was an old bull. My buddy that shot one, his didn't have much for fronts, but had all these points stacked across the top, and they both looked completely different. But it was cool to be able to see that. And that one that you shot though last year, that had just about a little bit of everything, or a lot of everything.
It had double shovels and the big sweeping beams there, and good tops too. It was it was a tank. I went with a couple with Anders and Dan from Kafaru. There's going to be a film coming out here soon on that hunt, but it'll be a good one to check out. Anders got a tank too there, and Dan got a good bull as well. So that was a fun hunt for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. I definitely want to get back up there at some point and do that hunt again, which it's becoming more difficult to be able to get in and go do that. But I definitely want to get back up there. I had a blast, and I do want to do it with a bow this time, which I did it with a rifle the first time I was up there. So just to kind of change it a little bit and see if I can do it with a bow, which where we were hunting, it's kind of nice because it does, at least where I was at, and it lend itself a little better to bow hunting than I actually thought it was going to. There was a little bit more rolls in the terrain and some different stuff to make it a little bit easier to stalk, versus I guess what I was picturing was just like flat tundra for miles.
Yeah, you definitely when you're bow hunting, you definitely have to kind of hunt the terrain more so than just go after every bull. I mean, I figured that out after 3 years now of going all day chasing bulls across wide open flat tundra is pretty worthless. But and if you can let so it's kind of a do-it-yourself hunt, but there's a fly-in service. So if you can let the pilot know, hey, I'm bow hunting, so a little bit hillier, tighter terrain definitely helps. If you can sneak up over a ridge and beyond the caribou, versus you spot them on a flat that's just like a mile flat or something, that's pretty tough, for sure.
Yeah.
Not saying it can't be done, but it's way better if you have some terrain to help you out on the stocks, for sure.
Yeah, and you'd probably, in the wide open flat stuff, be proficient with shooting at a pretty good distance.
Yeah, I mean, either way, I think you do. I had a buddy that went with me the first year, and he'd never shot past 40 yards, really. He was a whitetail hunter from the Midwest, and I really pushed him to, hey, why don't you really practice and get dialed into 60 at least? It's going to really open up your opportunities. And he shot a bull at 61 that year. So,
oh, really?
I think, I like to tell people, if you can, I think you'll get a lot more opportunities at, say, like 50 to 70 yard range or 60 to 80 yard range. If you can get proficient at that distance, can definitely help you out in that, barren ground caribou.
Yeah. No, that makes a whole lot of sense. And with your elk hunt that you had went on, the years kind of blend together, because I feel like you've been successful every year for the last however many years I've known you in Colorado or wherever you tend to go to on elk as well. And that's kind of where, we had talked about it in the past. So I'd recommend people going back to listen to some of the other podcasts I did with you about kind of how Iron Will was founded. But I know elk hunting has a sweet spot in your heart there.
Yeah, definitely. I, moved to Colorado 25 years ago, just got obsessed with elk hunting. I grew up whitetail hunting in Wisconsin, but just love bow hunting. And then, bugling bulls coming in, just there's nothing like it to me. And so I got pretty obsessed with it. Had a broadhead fail on an elk shoulder blade. That's been 20 years ago now. It was 2004. But that's what got me started on really applying mechanical engineering to bow hunting and developing better broadheads that will for sure be able to pass through that shoulder blade, get through the vitals, get you a quick kill on that if that particular shot happens, or, whenever there might be some bone or something a little harder in the way. But I love elk hunting. Took me took me a number of years to get good at it. And, it's still humbling at times, for sure. But yeah, I've gotten to where, I'm getting bulls every year now, and I just love it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I hope to be at a point where I can say the same with it. This year I did get a elk tag again. I drew a pretty good tag in Montana, so I'm excited about that. Nice. To get back and do it. It's been a couple of years since I've elk hunted, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting back at it.
Cool. Yeah, I was lucky in the draw myself. Well, I drew Montana general elk, so I'll go up there again. Nice. I'll hunt Colorado for elk, but I also drew a bighorn sheep tag in Colorado. So, I'm pretty excited. I'm super excited about that hunt.
Oh, that's incredible! And obviously, I'm assuming you're going to bow hunt it.
Yeah, it's an archery. It's an archery tag, but I would.
Okay.
I've only bow hunted for. I used to rifle hunt too, but it's probably been 15 years or more since I shot anything with a rifle. I've just strictly gone bow hunting. For me, I loved the challenge of it, and also at times I was struggling with it. I tried to hunt pronghorn, mule deer, elk with the bow. It can be pretty humbling at times, right? And I just decided, hey, I'm going all in on this. I'm going to get better at this, or die trying. So and really worked on my broadheads, of course, but then my whole arrow component set up, my arrow set up, my bow, all the other things too. I mean, I was training like an Olympic athlete for years to, going up to high altitude. And, I was just kind of doing everything I could to get better at that high country elk hunting. And it, came together. But it took quite a few years to get figured out.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point, and I think anybody that gets into bow hunting, it takes a lot of years. I mean, still all the time, I'm humbled by it as far as whether it's a bad shot or just trying to get an opportunity and you get caught drawing or whatever it might be. It's just bow hunting is difficult, and I'm sure even for you now that have done it for so many years and exclusively bow hunted, it's still really difficult.
Yeah, whenever I think, man, I'm good at this, I've got it all figured out. I'll just miss completely, or something. Something will happen to where I just remind myself I'll clip a twig or something that I didn't see and sail it over. I did that last year in Colorado. I think it was opening day or maybe day 2. Big bull. It stalked in on. It was kind of dark timber. It was it was in the shadows, but I thought I had a clean shot at it, and I thought I was going to take this, giant bull day 2, and I just clipped a little twig I didn't see, and it sailed it over his back. So, no matter how much you think you got to figure it out, it's still bow hunting. It's still tough, even if you say. I tell people this too, just because you drew like a great tag it's not a slam dunk. I mean, it's still bow hunting. So it's still tough.
Well, yeah, that was what reminds me of Montana a couple years ago when I was there. It was funny because for the first 5 years of bow hunting elk, it was just taking me so long to just, find elk and get opportunities. Well, I was finally getting those opportunities, and I shot at one bull, hit a branch, and it went right underneath him. And then I finally got a shot at the herd bull after like 14 days of hunting and 18 yards, and I hit a twig and it ended up going and hit him in the backstrap, unfortunately. But it was like, the best chip shot, I thought, and I'm looking through my peep and thought everything was good and trying to make it through a window, and I just hit it and it skipped up into his backstrap. And when I honestly, I would have been still wondering today what happened if it wasn't for having a camera there with me to see that, exactly what happened. But it was so frustrating. I was like, I'm finally getting these opportunities, and I feel like I can't get an arrow through anything. And too, like when you get in that dark timber, those branches go all the way to the ground in places. And as you're looking, it's hard for your eyes to focus on all of that stuff. You're looking at the bull, and it's hard to see some of those little twigs and things that are there. And yeah, I just wanted to curl up in a ball and cry.
Yeah. And, I think I've gotten better with this over the years, but it used to be when I was in on a bugle and bull, it's like, it's hard to think straight sometimes. I mean, it's exciting. You feel like you got to kill them quickly. Sometimes you just need a little bit of patience to make sure everything's good before you take the shot. And, I've gotten a lot better at making that good shot, making that kill shot when I get the opportunity. But it's still bow hunting. So it's still, things can always go wrong. So it's having everything dialed in, having your confidence up. So when you're taking that shot, you feel confident in it. It makes a big deal, makes a big difference as well.
Oh no, most definitely. And that's like one of the big differences I've learned with whitetail hunting versus elk hunting. Elk hunting, especially, when you're on the move, you're going, you don't know where that shot opportunity is going to happen. Everything's processing in the moment, where a lot of times when you're whitetail hunting, if you're in a tree stand, you're in a saddle or whatever you're doing, you're elevated, you're probably there for a few hours at least before an opportunity happens. So you're looking, you're checking your lanes, you're kind of seeing, okay, maybe a deer is going to come through there. It doesn't always happen that way, but for a lot of it, you kind of have an idea already, like, okay, I can't shoot there because this twig is here, there's some brush here, and it still can happen and have problems, but you have time to analyze it a little bit more than, in the moment when you're chasing a bugling bull and he kicks out and he's right there and you have your shot window.
Yeah, definitely. You're moving in on the bull. Maybe it's not the static situation. So there's a lot of decisions. There's a lot of bad decisions you can make too, right? Mm-hmm. And so definitely part of me getting better at elk hunting was getting that figured out. Like, I'd blown it in about every way you can, and so, not being aggressive enough, hanging back, sometimes being too aggressive, getting seen, not drawing when I needed to, I think, but the more times you get it kind of in the red zone close to elk, the more you learn, and the more I feel like that's what makes a lot of successful elk hunters is they just they just know what decisions. They know the right decisions to make on a lot of these things because they've been there. They've done that. They kind of know what the animal's going to do maybe. So some of that just comes with time, I think. And, more time close to elk, you figure out more and more of that stuff.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it seems like even for me, the more I've been around them, there's certain things that I don't have to necessarily think about because it just becomes second nature to go do that versus, say years prior that I would have been like, oh, what do I do here? But then, that's been met with new challenges of like, okay, now I'm in the red zone more. What do I do there? And that's just, something that when I was in Montana, again, a couple years ago, it was the best elk hunting trip I'd ever been on and was always in elk, which allowed me to learn a ton in a shorter window of time. I learned more, and I was there for 3 weeks. So I was there for a long time, but I learned more in that time than I did the 5 years prior to elk hunting. Even when I shot my bull in Idaho and all that, like I learned more in that time frame than I did in all those previous years combined about elk and what they do when you're up close to them.
Yeah, it's hard to learn about elk when you're hunting where they're not at, So I think a lot of guys struggle with that. They'll commit to a camp spot or whatever, and they'll just stay there. Even if the elk are blown out of there, they'll just hunt it for a week or something. I mean, you got to get on elk. You got to find them. You got to get close to them. But that can be hard to really figure out, how to get better at elk hunting if you're not getting on elk. That can be super frustrating for people, I'm sure. But then my only advice there is, don't hunt where they're not. Keep moving, go find them if they're not there. Don't just camp in a place because it's a nice place to camp. Go find the elk.
Yep, I know. I was bit by the bug of, I want this true backcountry experience. I want to backpack in. I want to do all that, which that's really cool. But you got to make sure you're in a place where there's elk if you're gonna be doing that, and or there's a lot of wasted time. So and I've learned this from other people and through experience of just now it takes me a little bit to really want to commit to backpacking into an area unless I know something's there. And, in Montana, we did backpack in, but it was also because we knew that there was elk there. My buddy Tim that I was hunting with, he was out there a couple of days beforehand and had found where a herd was at. And it was like, okay, this is what we need to do versus, just going blind into a basin and spending, half a day getting in, setting up your camp. Cause then it's even mentally difficult to be like, oh, do I really want to pack this up or should I give it another day or two?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I know what you mean. I mainly backcountry hunt, but when I went to Montana for the first time a few years back, we just started from the truck and just put on a ton of miles, found the elk, and then packed in after that. But if I go in Colorado, I've hunted, some wilderness areas enough that I kind of know if they're not in this basin, they'll be in, one of 3 or 4. So I'll just go light enough that I can, move camp, go find them. But there's more and more pressure in the high country too, and in wilderness areas than there ever used to be. So, sometimes I got to just pull out and just say, geez, where did these 4 camps come from that never been here before? And, they'll say like, oh, we saw some elk on Google Earth right in this basin. And that was a problem one year. Google Earth showed a big herd of elk right in the top of this basin where I hunt. So there was, 3 groups camping in there that I'd never seen before, but they didn't come back the next year. It's brutal. It was brutal hiking up and down, very high elevation. And too many guys in there just blew all the elk out. So it was a one-time problem, but yeah, you never know who's going to show up.
I've been wondering when that trend is going to start to go backwards a little bit because, backcountry hunting, I felt like became popular, I don't know, 7-8 years ago, as far as really mainstream, and a lot more people, especially in Colorado, being one of the only true over-the-counter states left, going in there of once people go in and they don't have success to start, doing something different or, it's just harder than what they thought because I know the first time I did it, it was like an eye opener of how difficult it was just to move around and do all those things.
Yeah, for sure. I saw some guys at a trailhead this maybe 2 years ago now. It was over the counter hunt in a wilderness area. It was a little trailhead that only had a few parking spots. And there was a few guys from Texas there, and they're around, I'd say 45, 50 years old. They had packs loaded up. I mean, these looked like they were 60 to 80 pound packs. And of course my name's on my truck, Iron Will and stuff. They're like, oh, Iron Will, this must be the best place in Colorado. And I'm like, well, it's a place I like a lot. It's the scenery's awesome, but it's a hard place to hunt. And then they're like, well, we're sorry we're in on your spot. I'm like, hey, no problem. It's public land. I'll tell you exactly where I'm going. I'm going 4 miles in, 4,000 feet straight up the top of this basin. I'm going to camp there, hunt the next basin. If they're not there, I'm going to move on. But I said, halfway that far, there's a trail that cuts to the right where there's some elk too. It's a lot easier to get to. But if you make it as far as me, you earned it. So I'll see you up there. I never saw those guys the whole week. I think they're on there. So, I think people see something on Google Earth and think this looks awesome. And they get there and they realize how big and steep and hard it is to get to some of these places. I mean, that's like going up the stairs. That is a really good trail, but it was like going straight up steep stairs for 4 miles. And with those heavy packs, I knew there's no way they're going to pound that out. And I mean, they didn't look super fit. They look, just a little overweight, but it was enough to tell me that, I mean, not that overweight guys can't pound it on. I know some guys can, but they also told me it was their first ever elk hunt. They'd never hunted high country. And this, and where I was camping was 11,700 feet. So, I mean, you don't want to go that high when you've never gone before either. So, anyway, going off on a tangent there, but a lot more guys trying to do the high country stuff, but not everybody's going to be able to either. So they might try it once and they'll be like, that's not for me,
Yeah, and talking about the heavy packs, that's a funny thing too, because the more you do those types of hunts, the more that you realize, what am I willing to carry and what am I not? And there's certain things where I'm willing to carry a little more weight, like my sleeping pad, because I'm like, all right, if I can't sleep good, my shoulders are hurting because I'm a side sleeper every night. Because then I ran into that where I had the ultralight sleeping pad, but my whole body hurt when I'd wake up in the morning. So that was one thing. But it's like, okay, do I need to take extras of this, or do I need to pack in this tent with a stove and all this stuff? I'm like, a lot of that stuff's gone now, out of my kit, because I was like, I just don't want to carry it. I want to, be as light as I can, but also have the necessities that I need.
Yeah, my gear list went down, 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 down. And now the last maybe the last 5 years, it's gone up a little bit, because I agree that I have to get a decent night's sleep going that hard all day, every day. So yeah, I went away from the 3/4 thin pad to the extra wide, extra long, extra thick, weighs a pound and a half, but an extra 3/4, extra half pound or whatever it was, is totally worth it if you can get a good night's sleep. So yeah, there's some trade-offs like that you figure out over time.
And the last thing I'll say about gear was in Montana, when I took in a floorless shelter. It was just like what was it? It was a Seek Outside, but anyways, it had a nest that you can put in it, like a bug net and everything. But I was just like, oh, I don't need that. I'm going to save the 6 ounces. Well, I went, the opener of Montana, and I hate spiders. I absolutely hate spiders. And it was 104 degrees in the opener, and my whole tent seemed like it was just full of spiders. And I was like, well, and my camera guy was laughing because I was Justin and I was smashing, you could hear me hitting the Tyvek at night, just, hitting spiders. And eventually I'm like, well, I'm either going to have to, get over it or go home. So I'm just going to have to get over it and understand that I'm living with the spiders there. But I was like, that was something where I didn't really think that one through when I was doing my planning, as far as, okay, it's, weighs next to nothing to carry this nest and add it in there, and I can, have a good night's sleep.
Yeah. And weather can vary so much one trip to the next that sometimes you got all this extra warm stuff and it's, like you said, 100 degrees or something. So it's it can be tough to figure it out.
Yeah, definitely. But, going back to what you were saying earlier about being confident in your setup for when that opportunity, comes, and I hear a lot as far as like, oh, I have, this bow arrow setup, everything, and just been using it forever and it works. And I don't think there's really any problem with that. If someone goes out and they shoot however many times in the year, okay, cool. But what I've found personally is just when I'm going into a hunt, I want to have absolutely no, and just from talking to so many people like yourself and other, quote unquote killers that get it done in that moment of truth, is when they draw their bow back, there is absolutely no doubt in their mind where that arrow is going, as far as they're confident it's going to hit its mark, and without, external things happening in the middle. But having that confidence just from experience is just like, this is so important. And, and that comes down to, your arrow setup, your bow, making sure you're practicing and understanding all the different conditions. What happens if you're shooting from your knees and you have to lean out, or you torquing your bow, what's going on there? Just all those different things.
Yeah. Confidence is huge, really. I know the times in the past when, say, I banged my bow or something. So I was like, and then I shot a bit and I thought, oh, it's a little bit off. If you got some lack of confidence when you're about to shoot an animal, I know personally it's made me make bad decisions, or, I need to shoot high and then shoot over, you do not having that confidence in the shot. You're probably going to make a bad shot, is what I've kind of found. At least me personally, that's what often happens. So yeah, I think, getting confident in your gear and your setup, so that when you go into the hunt, because a lot of times the shots aren't easy. They're not like flat ground, animals standing there waiting. It can be a little more difficult. It can be a little further. There can be like branches in the way. You got to kind of shoot over, under, whatever. You can be, angled up or down. So it's being confident that you can make those different shots is important, because that's probably the shot you're going to be presented. So it's like either either like I didn't shoot because I wasn't too confident in it, and that might be your one opportunity, or you can go into it thinking, I know I can make the shot. I'm going to kill this thing right now, and you get it done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, opportunities aren't usually showing up too many times on a hunt. If I get 1 to 2 opportunities on a 7 to 10 day hunt, that's pretty good. So being able to capitalize on those is super important. And with that, and to kind of dive a little bit into the setup side of it and being confident. And arrows are one of those things we talked about a little bit earlier, or something that I feel like there's a lot of people are changing all the time and going back and forth on it. And I've went through a bunch with myself on starting with, just a regular just arrow, not really caring what I'm shooting. It's an arrow. That's all it is. That's the way I thought about it, to building super heavy arrows that I was like, oh, I'm going to be able to punch through anything with it, but with a nice short 28-inch draw that I was going to, if I was off with my yardages by just a little bit, that I could completely miss an animal. And so now I'm kind of in a little bit of a middle ground as far as arrow weight. And, we were talking before the podcast here, because I'm shooting some of your arrow builds here, and just we're talking back and forth on it. But I want to start by just kind of starting at the basics on, when you're looking at an arrow, what are some things you should look for in that arrow? And then also as far as like, how would you look at the arrow, and then how would you go about building it for your setup?
Yeah, good question. And to give you a little background too, I worked on Broadhead designs for many years, and I feel pretty strongly that a durable fixed blade head is the right choice, certainly for elk hunting, but really for all bow hunting, I think, because it just gives you those different shot opportunities. If you get presented a frontal, if you hit some scapula, hit the spine, a durable fixed head that can actually cut through that bone, stay sharp, and get through is, I think, just a way better choice than having something that can fail. Thin, cheap 3-blade, or mechanical that just has a bunch of failure modes. If you hit the spine or scapula, probably it might get through, probably not though. So anyway, with the fixed blade, there's guys that just don't have the confidence that they can shoot them well. So I've spent a lot of time the last couple of years really diving into that. I've personally done a lot of testing prior to know that you can shoot fixed blade heads really well at long range. But the last couple of years, I sponsored a university study to really look at arrow flight with broadheads, fixed blade broadheads on the front, different vane designs, and really dig into all the physics of it, do a lot of testing on it. So there's a little bit of background on, why I've really kind of zeroed in on this, is because I feel like it's so important. It was for me as well to have a strong component system, have a strong arrow, and really understand the flight. But anyway, I'll share some of that here. But I wanted to give you some of my thinking on, I've really put a lot of time and effort into this in recent years. As far as like choosing what arrow would I choose, I generally recommend like 450 to 550 grains for most, North American big game hunting. I think that's a good range. You don't have to go really heavy. As you go higher in weight, you can get a little more penetration. And, we can go into the science there. It's strongly debated, but I think probably the easiest way to explain it is that if tissue is like viscoelastic and you're trying to cut through it faster, that's a higher shear rate. It'll take more force. So if you're not going as fast, you got more of that momentum in mass, it should penetrate further. I mean, that's the physics. I think a lot of people would say that as they've shot heavier versus lighter arrows, they do see more penetration. Not a huge factor. So when I've gone through like the math in it for my setup, I figure like going from 450 to 550, I might see like a 10% increase in penetration, probably somewhere in that 5 to 10% range. There's some assumptions in there, but so it's not a night and day difference. 650 grains isn't like a night and day. All of a sudden you're going to go through everything, where lighter you wouldn't. It's just kind of a continuous, probably continuous slight improvement with mass. The trade-off there is trajectory, though. So as we were talking with your shorter draw, 470 is probably a good place for you if you want to get good trajectory for long-range shooting, but yet have enough mass for good penetration. The broadhead matters more there too. I mean, you might get 10% more penetration with 100 grains more weight, but switching to, say, an iron will, very sharp cut on contact head that stays sharp and cuts through everything, that can literally give you more than double the penetration of another head that's not that sharp or that's a chisel point or something. So broadhead matters a lot there. But as we focus on arrows, choose something 450 to 550. We've got, and then the weight up front is what I would think about next. 150 to 175, I think, is a good total weight up front. That's your broadhead and components. We've got arrow charts on our website where we've gone through the modeling for each of the things in there, which is for your draw length, your bow poundage, and total weight up front. We've got charts from 125, 150, 175, up to 250 up front. You can just look and see what that would recommend. It'll give you total arrow weight, FOC, and this recommended spine. And I would look at those charts, look and see for your draw length, bow poundage, what's the optimal spine for you. And those are pretty conservative. Like, we don't put numbers in there that are going to be on the low end of spine. It's going to be kind of optimal to slightly high. So I think the numbers are pretty good in there. For bow hunting, I would generally recommend that kind of optimal spine to a bit stiff. For target archery, it doesn't matter so much. If you got a lot of flexing, it might not hurt your groups. It might actually even help your groups. That can vary. But for bow hunting, I think having less flexing of the arrow all the way down keeps that momentum, in a straight line, and you're better off for bow hunting for penetration. Having that momentum, which is mass times velocity, but it's a vector quantity, so it's like in that straight line. That's probably the best measure of how much penetration you're going to get, is that momentum at impact. So keeping that, arrow going straight and not having excessive, flexing all the way there is better. But yeah, I would, look at the different charts with different weights up front. I'd say look at 150 up front, 175, maybe even 200 if you're, a shorter draw, higher poundage. 200 might be one to look at too. But look at those different charts and see what the total arrow weight ends up being, and then decide what you want. 450 to 500 might lean a bit more towards the speed and trajectory, or a shorter draw length, or lower poundage. And 500 to 550 might be more if a guy's got, higher poundage, higher draw length. You can, arrow speed's another thing, is that if you're at up over 290 feet per second, I would say add some weight. A lot of bow shops you go to, they'll have a chronograph. You can put different weights up front, different field points on your arrow, and look and see what your arrow speed is going to be. If you're up over 290, I think you're probably better off adding some more mass, get it back down. I shoot a lot at 285, 285. But I think, say, 270 to 290 is a better place to be than 300 plus feet per second. It's just a lot harder to tune. It's less forgiving to tune with that higher velocity. You have a lot more, drag is proportional to velocity squared. So you bleed off there's a lot more drag, a lot more velocity loss at distance with that. So, for penetration overall, you're better off adding a little mass there if you're too fast. But that's what I would kind of look at for getting you started on what arrow, spine you might want. We can go into more details. We got any questions so far, Beau?
Yeah, well, I think that's really interesting about the speed aspect of it too. And I'd always heard that, as far as getting fixed blade heads to fly, you don't want to be too fast with it, which I've never had that problem being a 28-inch draw. I haven't found a bow that's getting me up over that unless I was shooting a super light arrow. But, typically, and I have to chrono my new bow and arrow setup, but typically I was at like 270 to 273. I do think 270, 272, somewhere in there. But my new bow does seem a little bit faster, but I'm assuming I'll still be in the 270s if I were to guess. But that's always kind of where I've been at. And I, with a properly tuned bow, I've never had issues with broadhead flight, especially when you have a broadhead that's machined well and it's ready to go from the factory there, because I've had problems in the past when I used the muzzies and stuff like that, just because then you'd spin the arrow and 1 out every 4 wasn't, or 1 out every 3 wasn't even spinning right, so it wasn't, you didn't really have a chance on how that was going to fly going down. But and the other thing about the front weight, so the 150 to 175 grains up front, and that's it doesn't matter if that's in the broadhead or the components, correct?
Correct. Yeah, and we get that question a lot. Like guys will say, "Should I shoot 100 grain head, 125, 150?" It doesn't really matter too much with our broadheads. The strength is we have very high strength in all sizes. Some manufacturers, their 125 grain heads might be a lot stronger than their 100 grain heads, but we use the same blade thickness, high strength material, so it doesn't too much matter if you want to shoot. Say, most of our customers are 100 or 125 grain heads, and then they'll add the components to get the rest. I'm currently shooting 125, probably the most, and if I want, and I'll shoot 150, 160, or 175 up front, kind of depending on different setups. If I want 150 up front total, I'm doing our 15 grade titanium hit insert and 10 grain titanium impact collar with the 125 head to get the 150. If I want 175, I'm often doing our 25 grain hit insert and a 25 grain impact collar to get 175 total. But as you mentioned, like the spin of the broadhead, everything's more critical with speed, but everything's also just more critical with fixed blade broadheads in general over a field point or a really small, say, mechanical. So spinning true is important. That's why I really like a reinforced hit system, because the broadhead shank aligns right to the ID of the arrow. So if you're using a good arrow that has good straightness, thousandths or even up to 3,000ths, I'd say straightness. And then, our broadheads are turned on a Swiss machine to like 1/10,000th of an inch we can hold for concentricity. So our broadheads are really well made, tight tolerances. We spin test them all, but you put that align that to the idea of the arrow, it's going to spin true, and that's pretty important. And it could be a problem with cheaper broadheads, but it can also be a problem with half outs and outserts. They're adding more tolerances. The broadhead's mounted, an inch out in front of the arrow with half out or outsert. And you're adding a few more tolerances. So it's very likely that when you spin that, you'll see the tip wobble back and forth, 5 or 10,000ths, and that'll affect your flight. That'll open up your groups at distance as well.
Okay, so then that's why with your components, which I've used the components in other arrows for quite a few years now, but where you have to really set that down inside the arrow. There's the hit insert tool that you have that you put it down inside the arrow quite a bit, and then just the collar that goes around it, which basically sits flush with the end of the arrow and doesn't stick out a whole lot.
Yeah, I like to say I prefer building strength down into the arrow. I really feel like that's the best way to get a strong connection there. Versus a lot of half outs. There's some strong half outs or outserts, even the steel ones, but that shank going in there, can still bend, and it bends easier when you have that bigger lever arm with the broadhead out an inch in front. So I go to tack events all the time and see guys shooting micros with half outs and outserts, and I say, "Can I see one of your arrows?" And I'll spin it on an arrow spinner, and you'd be surprised how many times they're wobbling. And they're like, "These are new arrows. I've only shot them at 3D targets." I'm like, "Yeah, you hit a hard spot in a 3D target and you can bend those aluminum half outs. And you might not see a problem with field points, but you do when you have broadheads." So I always point that out. When you put your broadheads on to go hunting, spin every arrow, on an arrow spinner, or put the tip down and spin it. if you're seeing wobble there's a problem. But yeah, that's why I like, building that strength down into the arrow. I think that, hardened metal, carbon fiber, hardened metal, it takes a bit, I think it absorbs more of that impact and stays straight.
Yeah,
for sure.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And what about on the back of the arrow? Do you, I've seen systems that have, collars that go on the back. Is that just for 3D? Is that basically the purpose of those? Like if someone were to hit the back of your arrow?
Yeah. I've had people ask me to make those. I'm like, I'm a bow hunter. And, so, I do some target archery, I do tack and stuff for fun, but I think that's to protect the back end of the arrow if somebody else is shooting at it and you're shooting 3D, which, I don't want to add any more mass at the back than I need to. I'm not an extreme FOC guy, but having a center of mass forward helps the arrow be more stable. So I like to avoid adding weight at the back, and that's what it would do. I mean, you could take one of our impact collars and put it over the back of the arrow, press a knock in, and you could use it as a knock collar if you want to. Our titanium ones weigh 10 grains and they're 0.7 inches long. That'll protect the back of your arrow. But no, I don't use them because I'm just concerned about bow hunting.
Yeah, no, that's what I figured with it. How about the knock itself? How important is that as far as, how it fits on your string, just the makeup of the knock there? Because I noticed, that you were using a little bit of a different knock that even comes standard with the Easton arrows, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, knock is really important. I'd say the knock end of your arrow doesn't get enough attention from people in general. And I'd first say that, the custom arrows we build, I have a machinist in a machining center, basically cutting and squaring both ends. So it's the arrow, we're spinning up the arrow, cutting it perfectly true, and then using a facing tool to just face that off and have it perfectly square front and back. And the back end, I think, is where a lot of people don't think about, and more and more guys are cutting their arrows from each end, but maybe not doing a great job of squaring it. And the knock end, that's a big problem. Because if you think about all that force, that 70 or 75 pounds, whatever you're shooting, all that force is going from your string through that knock into the arrow. And if the arrow's not cut straight, all that force is going to be on one side, one edge or the other. And so it can create a little difference in the way that arrow is going to flex or come off of your bow. So I think the squareness of your arrow at the knock end is really important. I'd also say that a lot of these little squaring tools, I've been at a shop where I had them cut some arrows for me quick, and then they're like, oh, we'll square them for you too. And they use this little squaring tool and they put it against it, and they did like one rotation with each arrow. And if you really want to square it, take like a paint marker and mark up that whole edge, and then use that squaring tool until that paint's all gone. So you've cleaned the whole thing up. It takes a long time. It takes like 10 minutes per arrow or something. Now there's some better squaring tools that go faster, but that little short one that most people use, you're doing nothing. You're doing nothing if you're doing it for like 30 seconds or a minute, which is typically what people do. So
that's so funny.
And,
go ahead.
And these things probably don't matter if you're shooting 20 or 30 yards. Maybe the average whitetail bow hunter, maybe it doesn't matter, but when I want to shoot broadheads very accurately to 80 yards. I mean, if I have an elk at 80, I want to kill that thing. And so all these things matter more if you're trying to get super accurate long range flight with broadheads. You can totally do it, but it just takes more attention to detail. And honestly, things don't have to be perfect. I'm surprised at how much this university study. We take a bow out of tune, and then a little out of tune, and then like way out of tune. And we test, broadheads with different vane designs. And it's amazing to me how much you can be off on things and still get really good flight at long range with fixed blade broadheads, with the right vane design on the back.
Yeah. First of all, I feel bad for the the person working at the bow shop when to cut your arrows, thinking like, I know how particular, if they knew who you were, but just like, you watch and being like, oh man, I wish I could do this myself.
Yeah, they did. They handed them to me. They said, I know you're real particular, so we squared them for you too.
That's so funny. What about, so the other thing is that with Nocks is one thing I've always struggled with is I like using a lighted nock when it comes to, places that they're allowed to be able to use. It's nice to be able to see, your arrow go through and have an idea of where you hit. So there's the benefits there, but I have not found one that works right. Sometimes they'll go in the back of the arrow, and I don't know if it's a tolerance issue, but some of them will literally almost fall out or just come out real easy, and other ones are tight fitting. Or what's happened to me multiple times over the last few years, they just don't turn on when they're supposed to, or they turn on when they're not supposed to. One of you found a good lighted nock, and two, or I guess even first it should be, are you a fan of them or use them?
Yeah, great question. So the nock itself, the design of the nock itself is really important as well, because you got all that force going through it, and as well as kind of the nock design, how it releases from the string. The custom arrow builds we use a AAE IP nock, IP5. I like that nock. It's got a short distance between the throat and the arrow, so you have like less plastic that has to flex in there. I think that's a good nock as far as a solid nock that's not a lighted nock. Lighted nocks, I see the advantage, right? For a while, years ago, I tried them all. I'd use them for like pig hunting, hog hunting, whitetail bears where the shots are closer, but I didn't shoot them very well at long range. My groups would open way up at say 80, 100 yards. And it's because they've got like a plunger in them. They've just weakened the structure of the nock. And I tested a bunch of them, didn't really find any that shot that well. So that's kind of what I did for years. Is I did for my Western big game hunting, I just wouldn't use them. Now I've used them more the last few years, and man, there certainly is advantage. Whenever I use them, I know exactly where I hit. Just that light, you can just see that light disappearing through the animal's hide, and I know exactly what I did on the shot. It's surprisingly because prior to that, I would like, oh yeah, I made this shot on it, and then I find the animal, like, geez, I didn't hit him anywhere close to where I thought. He must have really spun or whatever. And so, sometimes when they're spinning, it's still hard to figure out. But for the most part, you can see that nock disappear through the animal, and you just got a lot more confidence where it went, and you can find your arrow super quick. So I hesitate saying this because I know customers are going to ask for it now, but I've tooled up a nock. I've been developing one, trying to make one better because of the struggle I found of not having a great one out there. But I'm still working on it. Before you guys ask us if we're going to have it ready this year, probably not. But I see the advantages of having it, being able to find your arrow and see the lighted nock. But I think I see issues with the ones out there I'm using so far in one way or another. Yeah.
Yeah. So in other words, everyone email Bill and make sure you push him on it to get that out. No, that would be. I mean, obviously, the reason why that there's probably not one is because it's not easy to figure out. For if there's people have been bow hunting for how long, and technology's come a long ways, but when you look at, I just don't see. I've heard a lot of good things about the fire nocks, but I heard they're complicated to kind of set up and everything there, where it's like I think Nocturnals is the brand that I've used, and I don't recommend them. I just haven't found anything else that just, doesn't weigh a lot on the back and just, works 60% of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And, maybe once we launch them, I can tell you more. We can talk more about them. There's just some things in development, some issues I'm working through. So I don't really want to go into great detail on that yet.
Yeah. No, that's fine. But no, I think that kind of, we'll go into the veins here in a minute, but kind of front to back looking at the arrows. But why did you choose the Easton Axis to be the platform for your custom arrow builds and the ones that you can, buy from you?
Yeah, good question. I've tested a lot of arrows in recent years, and I feel like the major manufacturers, do a pretty good job. I think a lot of the smaller companies, to be honest, there's a factory or two in China where everybody's getting arrows from and then they're rebranding them with their name, and they're just, the consistency's not there in spine, weight. And, I don't trust that there's the quality control on those from one batch to the next, to be honest with you. Just measuring, a number of different arrows, I'll spine test, I'll do a lot of checks on them. And so, Easton, they've been around 100 years. They have good engineers. I've been to the factory. I've watched the pultrusion process, which is, it's a unique process there. They use that to make the Axis arrows, the 5mm, 4mm. And it's carbon fiber on a bunch of reels feeding right in, picking up resin, wrapping on a mandrel, and, the arrow's coming out the other end. They're, it's getting cut as it goes, but it's like a mile-long arrow that's being built. So I feel like the consistency's there. There's not really any seam on it. So the spine consistency, weight consistency is good. I just have confidence that they've got the engineers and quality control there. And it's an arrow I've used forever. I used it early on. At one point I didn't like the straightness of it. I didn't think the straightness of it was quite as good as it needed to be. Now this is a decade ago or more. And I went to some other ones. I've used FMJs. I've used some of the aluminum core ones can have a better straightness spine consistency, but I really like an all carbon arrow for bow hunting. I just feel like, if I'm out in the wilderness for 10 days and I shoot an arrow and it, I don't want it to bend. I don't want a slight bend to occur. I had one trip in the mountains where I fell down a ways on when I was going down a steep mountain, and I thought my arrows all looked okay, but what I didn't realize is I bent a couple of them just slightly to where they're hitting about 6 inches right at 50 yards. And that's kind of when I decided, all right, I'm done with aluminum for a hunting arrow. I want all carbon. So anyway, the Easton is, I like the spine consistency, straightness. The weight is, it's a pretty good, wall thickness is durable enough. The weights are pretty good on it. So anyway, I think there's other good arrows out there too, but it was definitely one of my favorites that I used for quite a bit. So that's why I chose to do that. And, I like that I have engineers that I can call and talk through any issues with,
Yeah.
I don't think I can guarantee that not all arrow companies have engineers that really understand the processes and the quality control there.
Yeah. And that's one thing I've learned from using a bunch of different arrows throughout the years of, if you get a good batch, it's like, okay, so some of the ones that were from the manufacturers in China, it's like, I've had some, there was ones I was using the last few years that did really well I had, a couple dozen arrows that were great. And then I got a batch of a couple dozen that I'd shoot them into a foam target and the back end of them would split. And it was just, a problem there with the quality control. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard that is Easton the only one that makes them in the U.S.?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
So that's another thing too. I mean, we make broadheads in the U.S., do machining in the U.S. I try to do, I'm a big fan of design and manufacture in the U.S. if at all possible. I mean, I know you can't buy an iPhone or a TV made in the U.S., but wherever possible, I like to get things done in the U.S. here. So I think that was definitely a draw that they're located here. And, I would say that the major arrow companies, so I'll just say that, Easton, Victory, Gold Tip, Black Eagle, I feel like I've shot arrows from all those companies. And I think they all do a pretty good job there. And I'm more about, you can buy a dozen arrows from any of these companies and go get a spine tester and check them yourself. You can check straightness, spine consistency. If you're really into the weeds and want to make sure things are good, that's a good thing to do. But then I'm more about the process after that, like cutting, squaring both ends really accurately, and then putting on components that are going to make a strong front end, and then having a good broadhead, and then having the right veins, having a good knock with a square back end, and then having the right veins needed to stabilize your arrow up front. So it's really kind of the whole arrow build that I've got tons of customers that shoot arrows from Victory, Gold Tip, Black Eagle, and I don't talk them out of it. I just tell them these are the other things I would do to make sure your arrow is going to be stable and fly well for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I Gold Tips are probably one of my favorites that I'd shot throughout the years. They were just super consistent, and I just knew that it seemed to be a pretty good arrow. I did have some issues with the outsert system I was shooting. The Platinum Pierces, the real small diameter ones, with those seemingly to bend, kind of what you were talking about with seeing them at TAC events with people's arrows, and just because of that front end part of that system that they came with. But the arrow itself was awesome. So I
would just say that if your main thing is bow hunting, I mean, that's mainly what you care about, get aluminum out of your system. I mean, aluminum, you don't use an aluminum hammer. I mean, aluminum isn't used doesn't do well in impact. I'm not saying it can't get by. Of course you can. I've shot arrows, for years with aluminum inserts, and, did fine. But if you really want the most robust things that can take an impact, spin true, get aluminum out of there. Steel, just any steel is better. A lot of the 303 steel is going to be a step up from aluminum. And then, I should also say components are often a very cheap aluminum. They're not even like 6061 or 7075. They are the cheapest, weakest, these things cost a dime to make type aluminum. The ones you get free with your arrows quite often are very, very cheap. Then you get into like the 303 steels, and then next level is like a hardened steel, which is what we use, either hardened steel or grade 5 titanium, which are both very strong to get to kind of their highest strength components you can get.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely falls in line with what kind of sold me on your broadheads 6 years ago now, was I remember you had said before I even met you, I think when you just came out with the company at that point, somewhere around that time, I remember you saying, like, do you want to leave something up to chance, with as far as when you're shooting an animal, and that really stuck with me. It's like, no, obviously you can get away with a lot of different things, but there's times when you can't, and I just want to have everything, built in a way, and seeing more of the arrow side of it. But, to dive now into the last component of the arrow, with being the fletchings, this is something I've played around with a lot. I've went from 3 fletch to 4 fletch to back to 3 fletch, different, higher profile veins to lower ones. And it was, I don't know, probably, we're recording this May 9th, so it's probably about a couple months ago, that right when the study came out, before you had released it, that you had done with, was it Colorado State University or Colorado University, you said?
CU, University of Colorado.
CU, okay.
In Boulder.
University of Colorado, where you dove into veins on, great detail. When I say great detail, I mean as much detail as you possibly could go into it on there. It was super interesting to me, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that and kind of some of your findings there. But before we do that, or maybe if this is the wrong order of operations, you tell me, but why 3 fletch versus 4 fletch?
Yeah, so good question. And they can both work. I think that in my opinion, from my testing, like a a 3-fletch higher profile is more efficient in doing what I want it to do. So, the job of a vane is really, it's got to spin up the arrow. It's got to stabilize the arrow. And those aren't the same thing, even though there's a bunch of videos out recently that saying this vane stabilizes the fastest because it spins up the fastest. Well, stability means if your arrow's tipped at some angle, if it comes out of your bow, say tail right, there's some angle to the oncoming airflow relative to the arrow. How quickly will it straighten out and go straight? Or will it ever go straight? Or will it just keep veering off course? And that has to do with the airflow across your broadhead will create some lift or side force. It doesn't have to be up necessarily, but some side force on your arrow that's going to want to push it off. And then you also have some side force on your vanes that's going to want to push it back on track. And having enough vane and the right shape of vane to make it quickly to kind of win that teeter-totter and quickly pull it back on, kind of rotates about the center of mass. And are you recording video on this too? I can kind of show with the arrow here. Okay. So for those that have video, I'll kind of show it here. So let's just say your arrow comes out. I'll just do it tail down so you can see better. So it comes down tail low or tip high, and that airflow across the arrow, across the blades is going to create this lift force. So you really have two forces there. Drag is defined as like in line with the flow. Lift is defined as perpendicular to the flow. So this lift force on the arrow head will want to push up and go off course. At the rear of the arrow, you've got the same airflow going across it. So it's going to push the back end up. And if the center of mass or your kind of pivot point there, your balance point is kind of where it's going to rotate about. You got this lever arm to the back, and then that force from the vanes creates a torque. So, and then the arrow head up front in the length to that center of mass is that force times distance creates a torque this way. So restoring torque is what I call that. Like you want to have a high restoring torque, or you want the vanes at back to have a higher force and lever arm to quickly bring that back on track and fly straight. So, I'm not going into a lot of detail when your only question was 3 versus 4, but it's probably good to explain a bit what all a vane needs to do first. So the main thing for bow hunting is it's got to stabilize the arrow. If there's any angle of attack, if there's any disturbance, whether it comes out of your bow a little bit, tail right, left, up or down, a gust of wind that maybe pushes it at some angle, even if you clip a blade of grass and it just has a little disturbance that's wanting to push it off, will it come back on or will it just veer off from that? So stability is number one. You want to have, you don't want any more drag than you need. So drag is like inline force. If your arrow's going, when your arrow is going perfectly straight, you want to minimize that inline drag because you don't want any more drop than you need to. You want to have that flat trajectory. You also don't want to reduce your velocity that would reduce your momentum at impact. So high stability, low drag, low wind drift. And wind drift, what actually happens there when you say it comes out of your bow and you got I think I did the math for like a 16 mile an hour crosswind. If the arrow's coming out at say 280, what happens is your arrow now it kicks a little bit to the side from that crosswind, but then it realigns with the resultant velocity of those two kind of winds combined. And what I end up doing is tipping it about 5 degrees into the wind as it goes down course. So it's that inline drag that actually creates that wind drift. That inline drag has a component downrange and sideways. So it's that inline drag. If you can reduce that, you can reduce wind drift. So that's why I think you want high stability, but low drag because it'll also give you low wind drift.
So that's where the 4-fletch, adds a little bit more drag to it.
It adds more drag. It adds a third more drag kind of at the back. Mm-hmm. So that's why I say it's not quite as efficient. It does stabilize a bit more as well. But if you are trying to kind of optimize both, all three maybe, drag, wind drift, and stability, I feel like a 3-vane higher profile is more efficient. And the last thing a vane needs to do is spin up the arrow. But to be honest, we've tested a lot of different vanes. And if you're in that 0.5 inch high, 0.5 to 0.58 inch high, or even say 0.48 to 0.58 inch high, 2 to 3 degree offset or helical, you're getting a good amount of rotation. So you don't have to have the fastest spinning arrow. In fact, I think a super fast spinning when you get like 5 or 6 degrees, I kind of question if it's worth doing it because of the added drag you get when it first comes out of your bow. But the spin up is a lesser factor because you can handle that with just getting 2 to 3 degree offset or helical to get enough spin. So anyway, a lot to that question, but I think that's my reason for saying a 3 high profile is a bit more efficient. That's not saying 4 high profile can't do even better for stability, but you're going to add some drag and some wind drift there.
Yep. So it's kind of balancing all of those things out to figure out what's the best setup for bow hunting and what you're looking to do. And with the I think this, I don't know if this is the right term, but the restoring torque, say if you did have it kick out, or is that the right term for that? If it kicked out and then you're trying to get it to restore back to, or what is the right term for that, restoring torque?
Yeah, that's fine. That's kind of what it does. Okay. It comes out of your bow. And if you're, if it's coming from your bow tune, it might just, kick it out tail left. What's happening there is your Nocks just not pushing in line with your rest. So, at that last second, that last bit of force is just pushing that tail out instead of straight in line. That's why, tuning your bow so that your knock is in line with your rest is like, something you definitely want to do. It doesn't have to be perfect, but to get it close is something it's important.
No, that is it's I like the way that you explained it there. And even so, one thing where I can say, even if your bow is perfectly in tune, sometimes your shot opportunities, say you're leaning out, from a bush and you're trying to shoot, you may end up inadvertently putting some torque on your bow and your bow hand as you're holding on to it to reach out and to make the shot happen. Sometimes those things do happen. So to have the vane system that can help you restore that a little bit to be able to come back. Obviously you don't want to be wrenching on it, but I've found in those scenarios I can find myself torquing a little bit, left or right. Usually it's me pushing into it, and then causing that knock to kick out a little bit.
Yeah, that just can happen hunting, and shooting up or down as well. It's hard to, if you change your heel pressure, you change your grip pressure at all, it can change your tune a little bit. And man, I didn't realize how much really until doing this university study, when I'd have a bow tuned for me and we'd put it on the shooting machine, the Hooter shooter, and the tune would be completely different. And then we would change the Hooter shooter grip pressure a little bit, or which way or how we're pulling the string back, the tune would change again. So minor changes in grip pressure will change your tune. And that's why, all the guys that might say like, oh yeah, the archery shop tuned my bow when I bought it, for me. You got to do that yourself. You got to be the guy shooting it when you're tuning it, whether you're paper tuning. And the way we quantify how far out of tune bows are for this study is also what I recommend to our customers to check if they're having a problem with the broadhead flight. What works really good is take a bear shaft, and just shoot field points, a bear shaft versus a fletch shaft. And so if you got all your arrows built up already, cut the vanes off one, add some tape to the back to get that weight to be about the same. Shoot a bear shaft versus a fletch shaft. Start at 30 yards. And then I'll do 30 and then 40. At 40 yards is the way we're testing the Hooter shooter tune. And if the fletch shaft with the field point is right in the bullseye, in the bear shaft, let's say it comes out tail left, it'll just stay tail left. The vanes won't correct it, so it'll just end up hitting right. And you'll see that the impact point is right, and the angle of the arrow, you can see that the angle of the arrow is still tail left, like it came out of the bow. And a lot of the study we're doing 8 inches off at 40 yards. So I consider that pretty far out of tune. What I found personally is if you're within 4 inches, and have a higher profile vein like this hybrid hunter that we can go into more detail, but this kind of did the best for accuracy in the study, accuracy, stability with fixed blade heads. If you're within 4 inches, which I currently have a bow that is, I'm testing right now. I see I hit with field points out to 100 yards, good groups. So 4 inches out of tune, that's good enough. You don't have to be perfect. If you're down under 4, you can stop. That's good enough with the right vein on the back. If you're trying to sneak by with lower profile veins, then it's got to be better. You're not going to be hitting quite as close then.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. And so when you're talking about doing the tune in, paper tuning, I'm assuming with checking that, or does it or do you use a different method for really checking it?
Yeah. So I'll start with the paper tune, and I'll shoot my fletch shaft and my bear shaft through paper, because a lot of times with the bear shaft, you can just see that tear a little bit more distinctly. Is it right, left, up, or down, and exactly what it's doing. So yeah, I'll start out with my rest at kind of the nominal position, with the arrow through the burger hole, perpendicular to the string, the bow out from the rest. Depending on your bow, it's 13/16, so it might be 0.781. Some bows are a little different, but I set it to nominal. Shoot through paper. I'm checking cam timing too first. Make sure cam timing is on, because that can affect knock. It can give you higher low tears if the cam timing's off. But cam timing is on, and then I'll shoot through paper, and then I'm typically setting up Hoyts or Matthews. So then I'm shifting cams, leaving the rest at nominal, shifting cams until I get that paper tune to look good. And then I'll shoot 50, 100 shots through it. Probably I might recheck it through paper. But you're going to get a little bit of string stretch, a little bit. And tuning isn't like a one-time deal. Unfortunately, it's something I continue to test or continue to check for, every couple of months. And that's why I like keeping that bear shaft. I shoot that bear shaft and a fletch shaft at 40, once a month or something. And it just gives me confidence. My tune hasn't changed. The bow's still dialed in. But anyway, yeah, I'll start through paper, and then I'm shooting like 10 or 12 feet through paper until I get a bullet hole. And then I'll go to just shooting targets. And, I might start at, you can start at 20 if you're worried about hitting the target, but bear shaft versus fletch shaft, say 20, 30, 40, it just amplifies it and you can see it more. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, don't just do it once, do it like 3 times. So a lot of times I tell our customers, just go to 30 yards, shoot a bear shaft, fletch shaft 3 times in a row, and write down like, where did your fletch shaft hit compared to your bear shaft? And if 3 times in a row, you're getting, say, 3 to 5 inches right at 30, you can probably do a little bit of adjustment there. And now I'm doing very small adjustments on my rest, right, left, up, or down to bring that bear shaft to where it's hitting with the fletch shaft closer. I want those 2 shafts. I mean, ideally, and I can typically get it very close to this. Ideally, at 30, they're hitting, the shafts are parallel to each other and they're within about an inch, inch and a half. You're probably good to go. I might shoot at 40 yards a bit then, just because that amplifies it a bit and make sure I'm confident that, yeah, it's still looking good there. But if your grip isn't consistent one shot to the next, you just won't be able to shoot the bear shaft in the same spot. So then that'll tell you, okay, there's something really wrong with my bow, maybe, or I need to work on my form. And maybe that's the point where you swallow your pride, go to your archery shop, have somebody help you, watch you shoot, help you with your form to get your form more consistent. Maybe there's just some issue there where you're changing your grip pressure each time. Maybe you're getting too much face pressure, or have a buddy take their iPhone behind you with slow-mo video. You shooting, and maybe you're like totally dropping your arm. Maybe you're grabbing maybe you're anticipating shot grabbing. Maybe you got some major issue that you got to really kind of fix first before you can too worried about dialing your bow in perfectly.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I know it's, I know it's helped with both me and my dad when we're going through and setting up our bows or doing anything. We'll get together and I'll have him watch me and vice versa, just to see, you know, he helped me figure out things with my grip as far as like, oh, looks like you're putting a little extra pressure on here, you know, maybe loosen that up or whatever. And that's one thing that I've learned, you know, talking about grabbing the bow as far as when you go to shoot. I've realized that I need a wrist strap because it gives me that mental confidence that my bow's not going to go flying, you know, falling out, even though it's not. It's just something in my head where I at that last second, you know, kind of, you know, grip the bow versus just letting it sit in my hand. But no, that's a good point.
But if you know, most of our customers say our broadheads are the best flying heads they've ever shot. But occasionally we'll get somebody that will struggle a bit with fixed blade heads in general. And, you know, we're happy to help you out. Call our customer service. We got awesome tech support. Bailey Cloud handles most of that. And she's a professional shooter, worked as a bow tech for several years. And she shoots, does a lot of hunting with traditional as well. But we've got a lot of suggestions, but it really comes down to a bow relatively well tuned, and we can tell you how to kind of check for that. Arrow that's properly spined, you know, nominal to a bit stiff is what I recommend, and we can help you with that as well, or check the charts on our website. And then, you know, an arrow that has enough vein on the back for the broadhead on the front. And I really think that veins that are 0.55, 0.58 inch high, you know, do the best. That higher profile does better. Also, we found, and we've just put 3 reports on our website from the last year's study that kind of showed the vein height and vein shape and how that is more efficient at that restoring torque. But, you know, vein like the hybrid hunter that has more area high and back just moves that center of pressure back and makes it more stable, and it's more efficient versus a longer, lower profile vein. And, you know, for a lot of target archery, and I've spoke with Dr. James Parks, who, you know, he's from Australia. He was a competitive archer there, and I think he's the coach for the Australian team. And he's got a PhD in mechanical engineering, did a lot of work on arrow flight for target archery. You know, a lot of his papers recommend, you know, a lower profile, longer vein. Because for target archery with just a field point on the front, stability is not really an issue, especially because they're shooting super straight arrows in target archery, and their bows are, you know, very well, you know, tuned and all that as well. So vein height is not so critical. So there he's just trying to reduce drag, because it's a lot of his shooting was field archery, what's known distances, but you're fighting wind drift. So, you know, shorter, lower vein, you know, that shorter, you know, parabolic vein is a good choice for that. And for target archery in general, not a bad way to go. But too many people have gone to that. I think I hear a lot of people that say, I used to shoot a high profile vein, but I was worried it was too loud or too much drag or whatever. Now I shoot a lower profile. Well, a lot of people have kind of shot themselves in the foot in terms of accuracy, I think. So anyway, one big finding from the study, taller veins make broadheads more accurate when things aren't perfect. So that was one thing that I, for sure, I'm trying to get out there and let people know.
Yeah, and I like how, you know, based off of the studies and what you've come to the conclusion on, you're setting this up for hunters and for hunting specifically. You know, there's, you know, obviously a bunch of different ways to skin the cat as far as how you can set things up, but the way you're looking at it is, all right, I'm going out in the field. You know, I like shooting tacks. I like doing that kind of stuff. That's fun. But what my optimal setup is for hunting and the specifics of that.
Yeah. And you're going to hear it's going to be different from different people. You know, Tim Gillingham, John Dudley, Levi, others are, I mean, not that they're not bow hunters. They are serious bow hunters for sure. But I feel like when your paycheck has come from, like, are you holding a half-inch group or an inch group type thing? I mean, they don't want to give up any accuracy. And, you know, I know Dudley, and I think this is great, you know, gets it close, on his tune, and then he'll shoot groups with field points to see what groups the tightest. I think that's a method a lot of target archers are going to do. What the issue I see with that potentially with bow hunting is that, and I've talked to Dr. James Parks about this, he hasn't found much difference in accuracy with spine. Like he can go pretty under spine, get more flex, and it doesn't change the point of impact. In fact, at times he'll get a better group, a tighter group being under spined. But you don't want that for bow hunting. You don't want, I mean, this is my opinion, but I think it's pretty sound. You don't want that arrow flexing all the way down to the target. And I'll see high-speed videos people are putting out. Some of the like more extreme, you can guess who the guys might be, but are more into the extreme FOC and just say add more point weight till the arrow comes out straighter or whatever. Their high-speed videos, the arrow is going like that all the way to the target, major bending up and down. Well, at impact, you don't want the arrow like that because that momentum now is not in a straight line. So it's not that force is not driving straight through the target. So, and really, that's why I'm doing all this research on bow hunting setups, broadheads on the front, because it's been lacking, to be honest with you. The research, any university study or research is really for target archery. So the things that are different are, this one, is that you don't want to be under spine. I think you want to be nominal to stiff because you don't want that excessive flexing. You care more about stability for sure. So taller veins with more area high and back is way more important in bow hunting than target archery. So that's another kind of key finding here, I would say. The wind drift thing, it depends on. I think if you're a whitetail hunter, never going to shoot over 40 yards, don't worry about wind drift. If you want to put a fourth vane on to add a little more stability, no problem. Your trajectory isn't going to be, you're going to be able to shoot well at 40 yards. That extra drag isn't going to really affect that distance. So anyway, I'm all about how do I become a better bow hunter? How do I help others? It really, I've been frustrated over the years, all the different varying information out there, heavy arrows, light arrows, speed, mass, and I'm a mechanical engineer. I mean, I learned this stuff inside and out. I really, I love bow hunting. I also love high-end mechanical engineering and really geeking out on this stuff. So, and, I understand this stuff, and I was struggling to figure out, what was right with the information out there. So that's why I did a lot of this research and testing myself. That's why I'm funding university studies now, so that independently we can provide data that hopefully people, if a company just says something, they can always think it could be biased, right? So that's why I like doing independent. I'm funding an independent study. These engineers that are doing this, they're not bow hunters. They're not going to,
they're just looking at the data.
They're just looking at the data. They've got no preconceived notion of what is a good vein or a bad vein. We've got over 2,000 hours now of computation of fluid dynamic modeling on arrows with, broadheads on the front and different vein designs on the back. So that's over 2 years of modeling. And in the model, we're modeling this airflow over it and looking at, pressures, the forces on the arrow, and we can look at the drag, the inline drag. We can look at when an arrow is tipped to that oncoming airflow, how much restoring torque it has. We can look at sound. We can look at turbulence. And then we've got over 2,000 shots now as well out of the shooting machine that we've recorded every one. We've recorded speed with the lab radar. We've got high-speed video looking at the spin up and the kind of the restoring, how the arrow might be fishtailing coming out. We've got microphones downrange where we're measuring sound going over it. What else am I missing there? But yeah, we're really, and then we're just kind of measuring accuracy downrange where we're measuring, where are the field points hitting, where are the broadheads hitting with different veins, and looking at how well they stabilize and how accurate they can be.
Yeah, and I would imagine that the last thing I'll say here or ask you about is that, obviously on the accuracy accuracy side, something like a mechanical probably doesn't have as much of an impact with that vane configuration. But, you know, even everything that you said about the arrows, I feel like still matter, you know, as far as the flexing, all that different stuff, as far as what the energy is going to be like when it hits the animal, all of that stuff still matters, because I hear it so much of, oh, I shoot mechanicals, it doesn't really matter, you know, how the tune is of your bow or the arrow setup. What do you think from that standpoint?
Yeah, you know, the bigger the blade, the more the less forgiving, you know, it becomes. And the more it's important to have, you know, taller vanes, stable vanes. But having a more stable arrow helps any broadhead in the front, you know, from a large fixed blade head to a more compact fixed blade head to a mechanical. A lot of times mechanicals, you know, they aren't drag free. They aren't, you know, it varies by design, of course, but they're very long. And there's, you know, there might not stick out as far diametrically, but if there's a little bit of angle to that head, there's quite a bit of drag that comes over. I think people would be surprised. The aerodynamics with a mechanical, you know, aren't ideal either, you know, compared to a field point. So, and they're more likely, since they're longer, they're more likely to be not perfectly spinning true as well. And often, you know, to be honest, a lot of them are cheaply made so that they're never going to spin completely true. So, you know, and so what happens when that point's not pointing straight forward, you get this pressure difference one side to another that wants to push it off. So having a more stable, having a taller vane, having enough rotation, you know, will help that as well. So, you know, yeah, all this stuff applies to guys shooting mechanicals as well. It's just mechanical can cover up these issues better, but you're still not very well. In fact, I think it's worse. Let's say your arrow say you're under spine, so you're getting excessive flexing. Okay. So that's going to reduce your momentum downrange. Also, if it's coming out, your bow's not tuned and it's fishtailing, or your vanes are short. So not only is it not tuned, so it's fishtailing, but now it's fishtailing all the way down, where your drag increases a lot when the arrow's not going straight, but it's going at an angle of, say, a 5-degree angle downrange. Your drag goes way up. So now your velocity is dropped. So now at impact, your momentum is dropped a lot, because for one, that mass times velocity is not in a straight line because your arrow's flexing. Or it might still be fishtailing, so it's not in a straight line there either. And also, the velocity is much lower than it would have been if your arrow was coming straight off and it was a stable arrow. So you got much less momentum, and now you've got something on the front that takes a lot more force to penetrate. You know, I was just in my hometown in Wisconsin at the local bar getting the fish fry Friday night, and we had to wait a long time because there were a lot of people there, and they had the, like, you know, Sportsman's Channel or some kind of whitetail hunting show on. We couldn't hear the sound, but we saw shot after shot with mechanicals. Man, they're barely going into the deer. I mean, it's like the whole arrow is sticking out of the deer when they're running away, and it just reminds me how much how those things kind of barely work. You know, I know I'm going to get a bunch of hate on that, but, you know, to me, it's like, man, I want something that's going to cut through no problem, not like it seems like barely get into the deer before they stop, you know, 6 inches or something. So, I mean, you can see how much more force they take to open and get in because they stop so quick. So all these things are critical as well. They're all going to make mechanicals shoot better as well. If you have a stable arrow, optimally spined, your bow's relatively well tuned, you know, all that's important.
Yeah, no, I think that's all really good information. And like you said, I think there's been a lot of information out there on arrows, and I feel like I've taken a lot of it in the same way that you'd said. I wasn't really sure what I learned at the outcome of, because there's so much information that was all kind of different through it. And I like your approach and the studies that have been done, and that's, you know, why I wanted you to come on and talk about it. So I appreciate you taking the time and doing so. Yeah,
and I want to throw it out there too that if somebody's wants to talk through their specific setup and what we might recommend for an arrow for them, or even just this is their current arrow setup, what do we think of it? You know, feel free to call our the number on the front page of our website, ironwilloutfitters.com, and we're happy to talk through that and give you help you out, give you some more confidence. If we see an issue like, yeah, you're underspined, or yeah, that vein's pretty short for the broadhead you're using, we'll give you that feedback. So
awesome.
I'm going to just throw that out there.
Yeah. So yeah, go check out the website, ironwilloutfitters.com, and then Iron Will Outfitters on Instagram, Facebook, and then YouTube. You have a lot of information on there as well.
Yeah, we have some videos on YouTube. In fact, these 3 university studies, I just did a short video explaining it for those that would rather, watch TV than read a book. I just tried to give some of the highlights there. So that's a quick way to get that information as well.
Awesome. Well, again, thanks, Bill, for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Beau. Let's good luck hunting this year, and let's recap sometime this fall.
Yeah, sounds good. Hopefully I see you this summer at some events too. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, share it with your buddies. Leave us a rating, a review, and subscribe. If you want to check out more content like this, there's plenty in the links below. We truly appreciate having you guys along with us.